Alright, so we're going to be taking a look at animation tools in 3ds Max. So let's just take a look at the interface a little bit. Here we have our track bar. This is our timeline where we're going to have our animation frames exist. Down below we have our playback controls. And then here we have our time configuration. We're going to be able to set our keys here using auto key or set key. So if you use set key, you have to click the keyframe button each time. Down here we have our filters, and this is going to tell us what attributes are going to be keyframed when we click on a key button. So here is our tangent type, and you can pick the default tangent. So that means as you set keyframes, this is going to be default to how the interpolation between keyframes is going to read, and you can go and change that later in the curve editor on a per key basis. So I'm just going to click in my perspective view. I'm going to hold down Alt W to go full screen. I prefer to have full screen just to work. Some people like to work in the quad view. I'm going to use a box for our demo just to make you aware that when you're setting up your scene, make sure under Customize, Preferences, File, you have Convert Local Paths to Relative. This way, if you move your project folder, all the assets will move with it. So I just want to make sure that's set up. Another thing to be conscious of is your unit setup. So by default, it's 1 inch with the generic units is our unit. You can check it by going into the unit setup system, and here it tells you that the system unit setup is scaled to 1 inch. So anytime you type in 1, it's going to register as 1 inch. We can also choose metric or US standard. So if we wanted to read back in feet and inches at a certain percentage, we can set it here. So I'm just going to leave it as the default. I'm going to come up and create a new project. So under File, we're going to go to Project and then Create Defaults. Now this is going to create subfolders. So I'm just going to navigate to another place on my hard drive, and in 3ds Max Build is where I put a lot of different files that I'm doing tutorials on. So I'll make a new folder and just call this Anim Tests. Click Select Folder and then click again, and it should set up your folder for your project. The way to check this is to do a save. Sometimes it doesn't quite work right. Just not always working. So here we go. File, Save As. And then when you click on Save As, you're going to check your path. And here I have that 3ds Build folder. I have the animation tests, and it's going to save in the scenes folder. So I know everything's working. I have my scene folder set up properly. So I'm just going to call this test 1, and you should do incremental saves. So by putting the 1, I hit save. When I go File, Save As, if I hit the plus and come back and take a look, again, Save As, you'll see I have test 1, test 02. And now as I'm saving, if one of my files go corrupt, I can go back to a step before where I've saved. So it's good to just click on Save, Control C, every so often as you're working. Autosave is set up, but it is nice to have control over that. Okay, so I'm going to make a box. This way it's just going to be clearer when I do a rotation. And I'm under my Create menu. I'm going to click on Box under Standard Primitives. And I want a cube. I'm going to do keyboard entry and then just set 12. So 12 is going to give me a 1 foot cube after I hit create. I'm going to change the color of this just a little bit so it's a little easier to read the lines. So if I come in and I say edged faces, any segments I have are going to read. And in this way, if I'm doing rotation on a sphere, I can see that before I put a texture on. So it's up to you how you have your viewport. So now that I just have an object in the scene, I want to grab my move tool, and up here we have our coordinates and how we're viewing our axis. It's default to view, but as you're animating, you either want to use gimbal or local. You can also use parent if you're in a child-parent situation. But for this, I don't have any parent. I'm just going to use gimbal. And this will make sure that my axis point is set up relative to the object and is going to rotate better. So down here on my time slider, I have 0 to 100 frames. If I want to change this or any of the other playback settings, I can go down to my time configuration settings. In my time configuration settings, I have NTSC, Film, PAL, or Custom. So NTSC is going to be 30 frames per second. Film is going to be 24 frames per second. PAL, 25. This is used in Europe, not in the United States. And then down here I can pick a custom rate. So I'm just going to go back to NTSC, 30 frames per second. This is how your frames are going to read. So you can use frames, SMPTE, or the Society of Motion Picture Technical Engineers, I believe it is. Your frames, so if you just wanted to read ticks for your frames or ticks for minutes, seconds, you can do that. Down here we have playback, and it's just going to play back in real time. So we have active viewport only and loop. So that means that we're going to play in real time, we're going to see only the animation in the active viewport, and then once it's done playing, it gets to the end of the timeline, it will loop the animation again. Playback at half speed, quarter speed, double, or 4 times the speed. And in this way you can go and check your animation. It's good if you just keep it on loop, change your speed, and watch it. And then you can study your animation and see if it's playing back properly. If you turn off real time, we can move forward in time, reverse our time, or ping pong. Here we have what is our active time slider. We start on frame 0 and we're going to frame 100, and then here it's telling you that your frame count is 101 because we're going from 0 to 100. Our length is 100 frames. So again, it's a little deceptive because you do have that 0 you start on. The current time indicator is this. So if I say frame 55 and I hit enter, now my playhead is at frame 55. So I'll just put it back to 0. And then down here we'll look at this later with your frames. So here we can auto key, and then we're going to set key. Again, our tangent type we'll look at shortly, but let's go and just set some keyframes for this object. So I'm going to move the box back. I'm on frame 0. I'm going to use auto key. Auto key is something you have to be a little careful with when you start off. It's very easy to think that you're doing animation and then later realize that you've recorded over your animation because you forgot to use your playhead on your time slider, you forgot to move. With auto key, you have to be careful. You have to make sure you have your time slider on the correct frame. When people are starting out with animation, this becomes a little dangerous. So if I go forward in time, I'm going to go 35 frames and I'm just going to move over to the other side. You'll see it set 2 keys. It set one where the initial object was with the playhead, and then it set one at the 35 frames. You can go and you can force a key, so if I move this up and I'm not sure if it's going to record on the first frame, I can just click on this button to force a key. But again, I moved it up, so now it's already auto-keyed without me touching anything. So that becomes the concern with the auto key. Okay, so I just set 2 frames with auto key, and if I go in and look at my keyframe filter, you'll see that I can currently record position, rotation, scale, and any IK parameters. If I were to use a modifier, it wouldn't catch those keyframes. So I'd have to click this on for it to catch it. If I do a material and animate or change a material, same thing. So just be aware that you have to have your key filters set. Now, another suggestion is if when you're new is you might want to just work with one parameter at a time. Go and do all your position, and then come back and set it just for rotation or scale. Again, because this is auto key, if I'm not paying attention, I could accidentally delete one of the keyframes by making a change. So if I'm here and I go back to the beginning, I'm going to rotate, but because I made those moves, I could have messed up something on the timeline because I didn't go back to my my keyframe the way I thought I was. Okay, so I'm going to undo that.